All right, we're back. I wanted to continue today with a riff on the video I did, I guess it was yesterday, which I have now gone back and labeled the video Massive Societal Change Part 1. About the time I finished Part 1, I realized that while that was valuable, it deserved a Part 2, and there might even be a Part 3. This might become a series, possibly. I'm not sure how I will work it out, but here's what I'm up to. So the video yesterday was an attempt to sort of break us out of the box, to say, listen, massive societal change. People talk about it. People talk about societal change. People talk about climate action. It's a bunch of euphemisms that kind of mean the same thing. You know, it's somewhere in there. We're going to have to make changes. So there are some very concrete things that must happen. We have be wishy-washy about this. Nor are there multiple ways that this can proceed. There are only a few options open now. And I'm talking as if the world has ended. And in fact, it has. The world has ended. The Titanic sank hours and hours after it hit the iceberg. But for people in the know aboard the Titanic, like engineers or people who have sailed on ships a lot, would have known pretty quick that it was going down. And so once you know that it's going down, it kind of doesn't matter how long it takes or when it actually happens. It doesn't really matter. Once the engines fall off the jet aircraft, even if the aircraft is flying at 50,000 feet, the engines fall off or the engines catch fire, they both quit. You're going down. That's it. So where do you go down? How fast does it happen? What happens to you at the end of going down? You're going down. So while there's a certain latency in the final outcome, there's a point where people in the know understand that there's going to be a final outcome, with emphasis on the word final. Final. Not an interim outcome, not a stepping stone to an outcome, not a journey to an outcome, a final outcome. And you could define that however you want. You could define that as the end of Western civilization. That's a final outcome of some definition. You could define that as the end of industrialization. That's an outcome. You could, whatever you define that to be. I'm calling it the end of civilization, which in my thinking sweeps up things like the end of industrialization, the end of monetary policy, the end of financialization, the end of sovereign nations. We just won't care anymore. The lines on maps won't matter. The maps won't matter. The end of maybe modern agriculture. And the end probably, I don't see how we avoid this, so I'll just say it. The end of there being 8,000 million humans. And what does the actual number become? I don't know. 8 million? Something along those lines. Somewhere between 8 and 80 million. Somewhere between 1/10 of 1% and 1%. Which is, those are both really tiny numbers. A 1% survival rate leaves you with 80 million people, but that's still 1%, folks. That's still 1 in 100. If you're not following the math, that's 1 in 100. And 1/10 of a percent is 1 in 1,000 survival rate. So those are my numbers. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the end of civilization. Another way to say the same thing is the title of this video, Massive Societal Collapse. Yesterday I talked about what that will look like when it's done. It's the equivalent of we've emerged on the other side and now we're living underground. And the point I was trying to make, there's a couple of points I was trying to make yesterday, and then I'll get to today's topics. One of the points I was trying to make is you really can't imagine what I'm talking about. You just can't. So I offered some pictures. They weren't my pictures. I went on the internet and found some pictures of people living underground. They weren't very good because they didn't show all the gardens, and they didn't show the walkways, and they didn't show the orchards and the vineyards, and they didn't show the textile mill, and they didn't show the grain mill, and they didn't show, the animals at pasture, and the animals hooked up to a plow, and the animals hooked up to a wagon. I would have to spend 3 hours on an AI image generating platform to generate the right image. Would that be worth doing? I guess so. But I think we're a long way from having that discussion. Like, what is it going to look like? We're going to have to get through the next few hours of the Titanic sinking, and then we can talk about what life is going to be like on a lifeboat. I think that's kind of the order of operations. So that's the approach I'm taking. And maybe everybody wants to jump to the lifeboat. What's a lifeboat look like? Well, I did a little bit of that yesterday, and I'm kind of going to do a little bit of that today. Massive societal change, okay? Let me switch screens here. It starts with this. So this is kind of combining the images from yesterday. This is AI generated. I mean, obviously, this isn't happening anywhere. But I went into an AI image tool and I asked it to generate this image for me. And I did a fair job, don't you think? So what are we talking about? Massive societal change. We have what I want to talk about, and this is hard. What I want to talk about, it's even hard for me to do, all right, because it's so complicated and it can get so involved. And but I guess I have to do this. Massive societal change. That's the fucking title. So let's just do this, all right? If there's a being part 8, well, so be it, right? Massive societal change has to start somewhere. My expectation is it doesn't start until we go way, way down a funnel of societal collapse, where the things that have allowed us to pretend everything was okay are stripped away. And right now, you can pretend that everything is fine because you don't, none of us, none of us. I say you, but that's because I want to talk to you. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to a bunch of random people. I want to talk to you, okay? The person in another room that's out of earshot of this, we don't really know where our food comes from. I do, because I think about that. A lot of people never think about it. They just go to the market, pick up a bunch of stuff off the shelves, put it in the cart, swipe the credit card, and they walk out. As far as they're concerned, the food came from the shelves. I mean, on some level of, well, I need food, I guess I have to go to the market. I mean, that's the level of thought process about where their food comes from. I'm making a big deal out of this, not to be mean, but because we've been trained, essentially. This is the propaganda of capitalism, if you like, that's where your food comes from. And whereas, there's a garden sections at Home Depot and Lowe's, they're not the biggest section of the place. As a rule, I mean, maybe some places they are, but as a rule, they're not that big. And maybe in the future, it turns out that when you go to Home Depot, it's really Garden Depot, and the entire store, so-called, is really plants and bulbs and bare root trees and vines, and it's all food related. Maybe there's a small flower section just because, people like to have pretty, but it's mostly food related. And there's seeds, and there's huge, and they would have huge racks of seeds. Again, I'm talking about the future, but how can I avoid this? They would have aisles of just seeds and bulbs and roots and other things that you could plant. The way we today have aisles of snack foods at the market. You would go to the Garden Depot or the Lowe's garden shop, and you would have all these things. And then there'd be a much, much smaller space off to one side that contains gardening tools, several varieties of shovels, different sizes, and a couple of varieties of and part of the reason why there wouldn't be a lot is because manufacturing at some point is going to become difficult. All those shovels on the rack might be handmade by somebody. Now, would Lowe's or Home Depot ever be in that business? Well, hey, there might be some mega store that actually gets all their materials from nearby. So there's a whole bunch of nearby blacksmiths who are selling shovels and cultivating tools and plows and into the garden store. And there's a whole nother bunch of providers who are providing the heirloom seeds that are not hybridized, and all that goes on the shelf. And somebody else is writing books about how to garden, either locally printing them or just writing them by hand, right? Who knows what this stuff is going to come from? Anyway, that could be your experience in the future, but we have to start thinking that we're not ready for this. That's your future. By the time you get to Garden Depot, which is really what we're going to have, we will have gone through several iterations, a spiral, a downward spiral of destruction and humiliation and loss of capabilities and loss of technology. Before we'll be thinking about going to the Garden Depot instead of the Home Depot, or before we really give up on going to the market. Now, there will always be a market, and it probably is walking distance, and it's small, and it's a produce stand and some dry goods, crystallized sugar, ground flour, and you probably know where the sugar came from. You know exactly where the cane fields are, and you know the farmer who raises the cane and cuts it and reduces it down into sugar. You know that guy. You've met him. The kids like to go out there and watch the operation and help with the, you know the guy. You know the miller who mills the wheat into flour. You know that guy. And you even grow some of your own wheat in some little, quarter acre of wheat you've got, and you take it down there and he mills it up for you for a small fee. You give him some of the grain and he puts that in his stores and he can sell that later. And that's the type of life that we're going into. And this image is an extension of the images yesterday. Those were like those images of a bunch of hobbit villages, people living underground. Again, why do you live underground? You live underground to escape the elements. The Earth dynamic system is going to try and kill us. Some people will run away from that. Most people won't. And even the ones who run away, they're just going to run away into some other crisis, some other shit show, in some other location because they're not really probably familiar with that location. So even the people that run away are going to have to eventually stop doing that and just settle down. And when you settle down, you're going to be looking up at the sky nervously. You're going to be looking at the buildings around you, most of which maybe have been abandoned. You're going to say, man, that's a fire hazard. We got storms, we got lightning, we got hail, and you're going to be thinking, probably without any prompting, you need to get underground. And so people will. And I don't think that's avoidable. I really don't. I just don't see how we avoid that. Now, the Earth dynamic system has so much energy in it and so much resulting violence that I don't see how we avoid, basically, living underground. But this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, this is just a little group of homes. It's like a village, right? It's a circular village, meaning, they surround an area of shared space, and you can imagine the children play there. It could even be bigger than this. There might be another shared space, being another group of homes 200 feet away, and they're connected by a little road, and it's shared space. So they're all connected together. And this is just a small example. There might be 8, 10 homes in this little neighborhood. Maybe this is a neighborhood, and everybody knows each other, and they spend time at each other's homes, and the children hang out in whichever home is serving bread and jelly. You know how it is with children. They belong to everybody, and once they're comfortable and they can run around and you don't feel like they're going to escape into the wilds, which having a circular village essentially prevents, then it's a different world. And this image promotes the idea that we have two tasks that must happen simultaneously. We must demolish the old world to make way for the new, and we must build the new. And we can use the resources of the old world to do that, but we still have to demolish the old. And there's going to be a transition period like this, which is what this image kind of encapsulates. There's going to be a transition period. It's going to be very difficult. on many levels. Physically difficult. Here we're using power tools to make the transition. But what if you don't have power tools? What if you have to do it with manual labor? What do you have to wait for nature to do it? What if that's the solution? You just wait for nature to knock down all these buildings. But if you want the soil underneath these buildings and underneath these parking lots and underneath these freeways, you're just going to have to get out there and tear it up. So there might be a transition where we use a lot of fossil fuels and similar types of technology to bring back the land. That's the task. Nobody's going to sign up for that. No one's going to sign up to tear down apartment buildings and office complexes. But I'm telling you, by the time we have gone through the choke point that is societal collapse, none of this will make any sense to you. You'll look at these buildings and you'll look at these landscapes. You'll say to yourself, "What a waste!" Because you're struggling to find land to grow things on. You got your backyard, you got your front yard, and then you got the street out in front of your front yard. That's the street. It's covered with asphalt. What a waste is what you're going to say to yourself. You're going to say that. You're going to be standing on this concrete sidewalk that doesn't go anywhere because there's nothing at the other end of it. Society has collapsed. There's no bar. There's no 7-Eleven. There's nowhere to go on this sidewalk. You're going to look at that concrete and you're going to think, my front yard garden ends at this concrete. What a waste. What can I do with this concrete? And maybe you'll keep the concrete right in front of your home. But what about the asphalt across that is the street? What about the concrete across the street? Maybe those homes have all been abandoned. Maybe they've burned down. Who knows? Maybe they've been scavenged for their wood and their plumbing and their wires in order to make a hobbit village, right? As happens in the book. And so now you just have empty lots across the street, and there's asphalt, and the empty lots they got the concrete foundations or the concrete slabs, and you're thinking, what a waste. We could use that land. Well, we can't use that land while it's got, a concrete driveway and a concrete foundation and all this. We can't plow that. We can't even let our animals loose in there to graze. There's trip hazards. There's things that you can step on. It's a dangerous place even to be. We don't even let the children play out there. So you would want to demolish that. Now, you can't demolish the house across the street or the business across the street until you've had a massive societal collapse, a complete collapse of civilization around you, in front of you. But at some point, you're going to be looking at that and saying, well, that business isn't coming back. They were selling chemicals and paints and strippers and brushes from China. Well, that's not happening anymore. If there's paints over there, we maybe could use them. We'd like to have them. And any spare brushes we can find in the rubble and anything that didn't burn, we'd like to salvage that. But that business is gone. They're not getting any more inventory from China or anywhere else. The Philippines or the upper Midwest, any place else. There's no one's going to deliver paint to that business. That business is a complete waste. The windows have been broken out. The interior has been ransacked. There's been paint spilled everywhere. And, what are we going to do with that? It's a complete waste. And you'll want to tear it down. And when you tear it down, you'll want to keep the lumber. These are the steps. These are the steps in massive societal change. People, when they talk about this, and they sometimes do, not so much a few years ago, but increasingly so, thinking people who are not in denial, are starting to wake up to the fact that the Titanic has struck an iceberg, are starting to think about societal change. Now, they can't do it. As I made a point in the last video, you cannot do this. This image is impossible until it isn't. It's painful and humiliating and annoying and possibly lethal that you can't do this. You're going to have to muddle through. You and I are going to have to muddle through. Somehow, we won't have the ability to escape the elements. A lot of communities will burn down in the fire. A lot of people in their standard homes with their standard insulation will cook alive inside their own homes from the heat. They'll bake in their own homes from the heat and die. and be charred remains. I know, that's horrific. That's a terrible thing to say. That will get me demonetized. Oh, wait, I don't sell ads. Okay? We will have a lot of that. If you were wondering how you lose 999 people out of 1,000, that's how you lose them. They're above ground, and there's no escape. They go in their homes, and they pray to whatever deity is going to save them, and there's no escape, and they die. Living underground is something that people will suddenly recognize by force of logic that the elements, the sky, the wind, the storms, is going to kill them. It's going to beat them to pieces. It's going to knock their house down around their head. It's going to destroy everything above ground. Fire and wind and tornadoes and everything else. And I know this is very apocalyptic and dramatic and Ermagerd. Yeah, right now, there's a massive heat wave crossing the United States. It'll eventually come to the West Coast, which is a bit odd, by the way. From east to west, that doesn't happen very often. Signs of the times, people. And it's going, I don't know how many people it's going to kill. Hundreds? Thousands? They'll never tell you. You'll never know. But that's what's going to happen. Eventually, individuals, groups of individuals, people who feel comfortable talking to each other, they'll start talking about the impossible thing. The earth is trying to kill us, and it's doing a pretty good job of it. And what are we going to do? Well, I'm basically living in my storm shelter these days. Oh, yeah, you are? You have a storm shelter? Yeah, well, I made a pretty big one about 10 years back because, I had a big family at the time. And I thought we might have to be down there for a couple of days, especially if the house is knocked off the foundation. That could be our shelter. Not our storm shelter, but our shelter. So I made a big one, and I built it underground, partially. Some of it's above ground, but I mounded dirt over it and made a steel door to get in and out. And, so I got a big storm shelter. And now that's my shelter because my house blew down. My house caught fire, whatever, all the things that happened. And your neighbors are going to be thinking, wow, you're lucky because we got nothing. We got a FEMA tent and we got the last one. As FEMA doesn't have any more money. So we got the last FEMA tent and we're lucky to have it. And my cousin has an RV and he's parked that in front of his house and he's living out of his RV, even though all the windows on one side got broke out. And this is going to be the conversation people are having. We can't rebuild. Oh, except this guy has a storm shelter that's big enough to be a shelter. A regular shelter. Also works for storms. And that's how the conversation is going to happen. People are going to have those conversations. And what they're talking about without knowing it, they will never, not because they're dumb or something, but they will never have the conversation that they're actually having. They won't recognize the conversation that they're actually having as being a conversation about massive societal change. And when everybody goes back to their lot and they help each other dig a hole in the ground, they help each other erect a building inside that hole and make the inside comfortable and then put dirt over it and decide to start gardening around their thing and and then the FEMA tent falls apart and rots in the sun and they don't even care because they've got a nice underground shelter, and the next time a tornado comes through they just sit in their shelter and wait for it to pass and it's fine and everything's groovy. That's massive societal change. They'll never say that. Let's have some massive societal change. That's not going to be the conversation point. That will never happen. They will never speak those words. But they will act on they will act on that principle. You might have to wait for nature to tear it down for you. But you don't have to. And once one community starts digging in, other communities are going to notice that. They're going to say, what? That whole community of 2,500 people, they're now rebuilding their houses underground? What does the zoning commission say about that? What is the city attorney say about that? Aren't there lawyers to stop people from doing things like that? This is nuts. This is insane. What is this, communism? There'll be all kinds of hair pulling and, and doubts and concerns about what these people are doing. This is weird. They're living underground. But then someone in the crowd will say, yeah, it kind of looks weird, but guess what? It makes a lot of sense. And when that one person says it makes a lot of sense, that's him saying, yeah, massive societal change. It's a good thing. And they'll start changing. Now I'm focusing on living underground, because it is such an obvious visual departure from what we're doing. It is clearly massive societal change. I could talk about everyone needs to grow their own food, and that's like, okay, that has no impact on you or people around you. It just doesn't have any impact. And we've already gotten a lot of, there's different things you can do as a consumer. You can buy an electric car, an EV. You could put solar panels on your house. You could have a green cruise or whatever. And, you could fly on a green airline. And there's all this propaganda and all this bullshit about what societal change should look like. But all it is just different ways of consuming. Everyone still has a car. Some people have electric cars. Some people have gas-powered cars. Some people have diesel-powered cars. They've all got cars. And they're still using the freeways. And they're still driving to the Costco. And they're still driving to their parents' house on Thanksgiving, 400 miles away. And that's not massive societal change. That's just different ways of consuming your way into oblivion. Because that's where all this is headed. What does massive societal change look like? It looks like this picture, where we're tearing down the old, or it is torn down for us. That's the difference between a chosen path of demolition versus a random path of demolition. You either do it deliberately, or it is done to you. Okay? But there's so much more to it than that. We need a kind of change that actually pulls us out of consumerism. For one thing, consumerism, which is the stepchild of capitalism, destroyed the planet. There you go. Our planet has hit that iceberg, and we're going down. It's going to be painful, folks. This thing is going down. It's going down. There's no question about it. And a lot more people are starting to wake up to having the realization and thus the conversation about this sucker may be going down. And it'll go from maybe going down to, well, this sucker's finished. Time to abandon ship. Time to abandon our current way of organizing ourselves and adapting a new one. And no one wants to have that conversation at present. They may never have that conversation. The reality may be forced upon them, like the Titanic basically slipping beneath the waves. When the Titanic slipped beneath the waves, then you just couldn't delay anymore. Here's your reality. You thought it wasn't going to happen. Now it happened. Are you on the Titanic or are you off the Titanic? That's the bifurcation. That's the path. Did you choose to get off and maybe have a chance at survival, or did you deliberately choose to stay on the ship because you just couldn't imagine it sinking? So you made that choice, and now probably you either float away on a lifeboat or you go down with the ship. And we're at that point now. People need to choose. We're at that point now. The decks on our societal and cultural or civilizational Titanic, the decks are tilting hard. If you're in denial now, it's what? Because you're drunk, you're mentally ill. I don't know what your problem is. But if you're in denial now, well, then I guess you're going down with the ship because you've got a problem. The decks are tilting. The heat dome is locking in over the U.S. lower 48 states, and it's going to start in the east, and then it's going to head west, which is a bit odd, just so you know. More signs of the times if you needed more signs. And it's going to cook people. And it's going to kill the ones that right now can't imagine that something like that could happen to them. The deck is tilting. This thing is slipping beneath the waves. Are you going to be off of it, or are you going to be stuck on it? Now, most of us, 999 out of 1,000, will be stuck on the ship when it finally slips beneath the waves. Either we couldn't get off, they didn't allow us to get off, we believed it was fine, someone told us it was fine and we believed them. Whatever happened, didn't lift a finger to save themselves. This sucker's going down, folks. It is going down, and more people besides myself are waking up to the fact that, okay, it's a done deal. This is it. And now is the time to talk about massive societal change. Now, I started out that rant by noting that changing your consumerism doesn't really save the situation. Massive societal change is going to have to be a complete departure from anything that's dependent on fossil fuels. Now, sometimes it's hard to recognize when something you're doing or something somebody else is doing that's a service to you is completely dependent on fossil fuels. There's a couple of categories, and these will undergo massive societal change. These are elements of our current civilization that will undergo massive societal change. Many of the things I'm about to mention will simply vanish. They'll just vanish. That's change. That counts. That's basically going down with the ship. They will disappear. Some of them don't have to disappear and may or may not. Some of these things in this list, and I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm just going to have to make it up. These videos are always completely unscripted. You have to roll with me on this one. Some of the things are amenable to individual actions, meaning you have agency. You could change these things for your benefit, and some of them don't. Some of them are either too big or too complicated or too out of your hands that you can't do anything about them. I'm going to start with food supply. We are going to lose our food supply completely. Just completely. I can't. If I were to sit here and think, what part of our food supply would we continue to have? I can't think of anything. Do you have a garden in your backyard? Is it successful? Are you growing a lot of things? Okay, then I guess you have something. You don't have everything. Trust me on that. You do not have everything you're going to need. For one thing, almost nobody, certainly in a suburban or a urban or a urban rural transition area, has a large enough lot or the right kind of equipment to manage a large garden. Now, you could have a large garden. You could take. Let me stick with my thought. You're not going to have your own food. You won't. You need to, but you can somewhat correct for that by growing your own food as much as you can and being very careful about what you grow. So you would want to grow things that grow in your climate. Oh, hey, if you live in the suburbs of Phoenix, get out. That's not going to work. If you live up in the piney woods where you're completely surrounded by trees and the soil is so acidic and crappy that you can't grow anything other than weeds, get out. I don't know what to tell you. There are places that are simply not suitable for human habitation going forward, just not going to make it. Your plan now, if that's your situation, that you can't really have a garden, or you're living in a mobile home and you're surrounded by concrete on your little posted stamp lot, if that's your situation, then you really need to start thinking about changing your situation somehow, or be ready to struggle, be ready to run away. And if you can't grow your own food, one solution might be to find somebody who does have the land and tell them, hey, You have the land and you have the means otherwise, but you don't have enough human labor, because that diesel tractor you got parked on the edge of your driveway, that's not going to work. So you're going to need people, and I want to be that person. And you can cut a deal, and you can live in a 10 by 10, I don't want to call it a shack, a 10 by 10 tiny home. Let's call it that, tiny home. You can live in a 10 by 10 tiny home with a sleeping arrangement and maybe some food storage, and maybe the cooking is all done in the house, and you work all that out and you make that deal, and then you're going to be labor for all the food production, and in exchange for your labor you get some of the food. You could do that. That is in your wheelhouse. And if you're living in a double wide mobile home in a mobile home park, and you've got enough lot size to park your car under a carport on concrete, then that's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And you can start thinking about it. You can even start planning. You could make this change anytime you want to. You just have to find somebody right now. I don't know what, you email somebody, get on the phone, call some friends of yours. You could figure out right now how you could work it out so that you could live on someone's land and provide them with labor. And your commitment is that you will manage the gardens. And let me tell you something. That is not a bad vocation right now. That is not a bad thing to want to do. That is the correct thing to want to do. It is also correct that you want to lend your labor to a community effort for survival. That is correct. That is exactly the thing to do. That is both a combination of demolition. You're abandoning something that has no future. You're abandoning it straight out. And it's also construction. You're building a new life around a completely different set of values. That, for you individually, would be massive societal change. You've opted out. And if you're leaving your job or you're leaving a familiar community, you've opted out of a lot of things. And people who decide to do this, decide to abandon a situation that is, to their thinking and to their logical thinking, is fatal. That is a controlled demolition. That is the correct thing to do. That is getting to a lifeboat. And you have to make a few phone calls, and then you have to go build your 10 by 10 tiny home and appoint it correctly, and work with the landowner and agree that you'll do whatever needs to be done, and you're going to get your part of the food harvest and your part of any of the income if that's what they're going to do with the food. You could figure all this out ahead of time, and you could do it and execute on it. You could do it now. You have agency to do that now. And if you're in a bad situation, and you're going to find out when the heat wave comes, if that affects you personally, then you have to start thinking about that. Will you? No, you won't. Nobody will. Not now. But a few years from now, maybe you'll remember that was always on the table. Massive societal change will be imposed on us. How we react to it is up to us as individuals. And the individuals who react to it, and rather than let it wash over them like the sinking of the Titanic, the people who react to it, who say, I'm changing my situation, then they are essentially on a lifeboat. They have abandoned the situation as it comes crashing down. There is no chance of this current way of organizing humans going forward. It can't. The reality of global heating and the physics so implied is going to crush the inherent complexity in our current organizational structures. All that complexity and all that reliance on, for example, fossil fuels is going to come crashing down. It will be more problematic for, let me say this differently. That crashing down will be less problematic for the wealthy because they can flee. They can make changes. They can buy another home. They can buy acreage. They can buy people to come and live on their acreage with the commitment that they will. So do you need to find those people? Or are you that person? If you're the person with the money who can start this whole thing over for themselves, then one of your requirements is to open up your new experience to the people who don't have your opportunities. And why would you do that? And why, out of the goodness of your heart? No, of course not. Because you're not going to have fossil fuels. So you're not going to have a tractor, and you're not going to have a big automated harvesting machine. You're going to need human labor. And that story is 8,000 years old at this point. That's the 8,000-year-old story. And why does the wealthy person, have all these other people living on their property and, working out? Because they want to eat. They want to eat just like everybody else wants to eat. So this is working together. This is the people with the resources creating the situation that represents massive societal change, because that's what it is. And what they're all doing is they're creating a lifeboat. And they're all going to float away from the sinking of this civilization, which it must do. That's why we do this. So I start with food. You're not going to have access to food unless you grow your own food. And in your backyard, you can do something. In your front yard, you can do a little more. Although if it's in the front yard, people are going to take it for their own purposes. But if you don't mind them taking it, if you're actually going to feed people that way, then grow food in the front yard. Let them take it. I tell my wife that all the time. Grow whatever you want in the front yard. And she has all kinds of things growing. We have a pomegranate tree, a lemon tree. What else we have? All kinds of things. And people pick the lemons and people pick the pomegranates, and she complains about it. I'm like, you put them in the front yard. What do you expect? Make sure you got something for yourself, or be out there before people pick them all and get them for yourself. But if you put them out front and people take them, well, you've done something for people, right? You've done something, some little thing for people. And maybe the thing you've done for people by planting in your front yard is you just showed them the way. Yeah, pomegranates grow on trees. A lot of people don't even know that. Most people have never seen a pomegranate tree. They're basically bushes. Most people have never seen a lemon tree. Never seen a lemon tree. Never seen an orange tree. Don't even know what they look like. And probably wouldn't pick the fruit and eat it. Because there's something wrong with it. Because it's not in a supermarket. We have neighbors, who will remain unnamed, who have an orange tree. And they won't eat the oranges. Why? Because they picked them off the tree. What is that? So other people get their oranges. Fine, we'll take them. There's a house down the street, just a short walk, that has 2 lemon trees. No, an orange and a lemon. And they just throw the gate open. They have a nice picket fence around their property. They throw the gate open. Well, they used to. And they used to have a fruit picker, the long pole with the basket on the end that you can hook the fruit and pull it off. Because the orange tree is really huge. And they just encourage people to pick the fruit and help yourself. And sometimes they'll pick the fruit and just put it out on the sidewalk and say, here, help yourself, free. And that's nothing wrong with that. That is absolutely perfect. I mean, there's nothing going on in their front yard that they can't, throw the gate open. They don't have kids or a dog or anything like that. They just throw the gate open. People pick, and people leave the harvesting pole on the ground under the orange tree. And I notice now it's gone. So maybe somebody stole it, because there's always going to be someone who steals it. But what are these things? $20 at Lowe's, and maybe they're more like 40. And you only lose one like once every 4 or 5 years, because there's that person who comes around every 4 or 5 years and says, oh, I really need this, and they take it. And so every 4 or 5 years you buy another one, stick it out there for people to pick the oranges. Plus it cleans up your front yard. You don't have to worry about the oranges falling and making a mess. So a good reason to do that. I'm just talking about what happens if you grow food in the public sphere. That's not a bad thing. Do it. Grow tomatoes in the public sphere. People might pick them. People might eat them. And then they might go home and say, I'm going to grow some tomatoes. And then they do. And what are you doing? You're creating what I like to call capacity. You're creating capacity for people to think a certain way and then act on that. Growing food is going to be critical, people. It's the one thing that absolutely foursquare will ruin you if you don't have food. You will become a different human being if you're hungry. And if you don't want to be that human being, then you need to have food, and you're going to have to grow it yourself. What can you grow? Well, yeah, tomatoes are pretty versatile. You can grow okra. It's also really versatile. My wife just came home with some okra. We haven't been able to grow okra on our property. I don't know why. I think it's too hot. Our backyard is too hot. It's my theory. And tomatoes you can make into sauces of various kinds. And also, tomatoes are really easy to can. So you can do food preservation because they're fairly acidic. So if you have a hot water canner, which is relatively cheap, a lot of people can buy those, and just use it on the cooktop, hot water canner, and then you have mason jars, which are also easy to attain, and sometimes even some of your used jars turn out to be mason jars. So all you need are mason jar lids, and the lids are really cheap. So you keep your jars, if they're mason jars, meaning they take the mason jar lid. So they're standard types of jars. Then you can can your own tomatoes. Now, you'll want to follow a recipe, and you'll want to be careful that you do it correctly. Otherwise, you've wasted your time. But because tomatoes are acidic, they can really well. They're one of the things that people recommend. Oh, yeah, you should definitely be canning tomatoes if you've got a lot of tomatoes. And you just can them as they are. You may want to cut them up, dice them up, so you have diced tomatoes in a jar. You can them that way. Or you could make sauces, the kind of sauces you maybe make all the time with canned tomatoes. Make them with your fresh tomatoes, and then can the sauce. And so long as it's very watery, it cans just fine in a water canner, water-based canner. Tomatoes and other acidic foods work equally well. If you want to can produce that isn't acidic, like green beans, then you want to buy a pressure canner and then follow the directions. Pressure canners, they know what you're doing, and they know how you should do it successfully. Another thing my wife and I have done with great success is just can dry beans. Oh, they turn out so good. I'm not sure why, but they're so amazingly good. You just can your dry beans. You should look it up on the internet. There's lots of women, mostly women, who do this because it's really easy to do. And you can your dry beans, and if you can your dry beans, then you have instant food. It's like opening a can of beans. Plus, you get to keep the jar on the lid and make more canned beans later. You pour it in a pot, heat it up. Oh, they're so good. We recently canned pinto beans and garbanzo beans, and they look great. They're sitting on the shelf right now, and we've eaten them, and they're absolutely scrumptious. No comparison to the stuff you buy at the store. No comparison. Total win. So you can do this. Of course, you can can fruits. If you have a fruit tree, let's say a plum tree, you can can fruit. Fruit, I think, lends itself to hot water canning. You might want to use a pressure canner. But when you can fruit, you're generally putting a lot of sugar in it. The sugar also acts as a preservative, because what are you doing? You're making jams and jellies. Oh, we all love jams and jellies, especially in the winter. You've eaten all that fresh fruit in the summer and during the harvest, and then later on, cold days, December, January here in the Northern Hemisphere, you've just made some toast, and then you've got that delicious jam you made, and you crack that open, and you put that all over your bread, and you're thinking, yep, this is the life. You can applesauce. I'm mentioning these things in particular because these are things that if you have a producing tree, for example, a plum tree or a peach tree or an apple tree, apples in particular, you're going to get so much that you can't eat it. But you can can it. You can can apples, basically make applesauce. You can create applesauce on a cooktop, put it in a jar, can it to preserve it, and put it on the shelf, and you have applesauce. And you put the sugar, the cinnamon, whatever you like in your applesauce, put it on the shelf, and later on, again, it's January, it's February, it's cold outside, and you really would like to have some applesauce, or you'd like to make some apple turnovers. You just take the lid off of that, pour it out, cook with it, and you've got exactly what you need. Now, you could go down to the market and buy organic applesauce, and that's fine. You could do that. But what I'm talking about is when you can't do that, because that day is coming. That day is absolutely coming. I'm really sorry. I wish there was some way around this. If there was a way around this, I wouldn't be talking about it. There's no way around this. It's going to happen. And it could be that the wealthy get the last of the fresh apples, and an apple is $4 a piece, but you've got a tree in your backyard, and maybe some of the apples have worms in them. You have to cut around the wormholes, but then you do a little bit of work, half an hour's worth of work, and you got a whole colander full of apple pieces, or maybe a whole 3-quart saucepan full of apple pieces, and you're just going to make applesauce. You're going to can those things whole. You're going to put those in the pressure canner, and you're going to work those things up. And you got a recipe for apples, several types of things you could make, and several types of ways you can can them. And you've got recipes for making several kinds of jam, and you've got grapes, and you've got strawberries, and maybe you buy them at the farmer's market in bulk. You come back with a big lug of grapes, and rather than eating them individually, you just make grape jelly out of them. You just make grape jelly. And then you've got 8 or 10 pint jars, or maybe 20 pint jars of grape jelly, and you can give it away to your friends, and you can eat it yourself later. And this is when the harvest comes in, what do people do? Well, the orientation used to be, when the harvest comes in, you get to work, and you lay up that food for later. And you could grow things in your garden that either overwinter well, like root vegetables, or that can really well. We've got a arbor in the front of our house of grapes. They're wine grapes. I don't know what they are. They're a little tiny black grape. You can eat them. They're nice, but they're mostly seed. But if you were to crush them, and I have the colander for doing that, you would get the grape juice out. You could make grape jelly. It would be delicious. It would be incredible. And we eventually need to do that. We have a river down here, and on the river there's blackberries growing. And when I was a child, we used to go, when the blackberries were ripe, we would go down to the river and back the pickup truck into the blackberry bushes, and then from the pickup truck just pick all the blackberries we could reach. I remember doing that as a child. 8 years old, 10 years old, height of summer. The best part of summer. And one of the best things that came out of the blackberry harvest, these were wild blackberries. Just anybody could have them if they wanted them. Nobody bothered. And the best part of the blackberry harvest was that a grandma made blackberry cobbler. And she made blackberry jams and jellies out of it. And then we had blackberry preserves later on in the year. And those lasted us all summer. And then within a few months of running out of the last of the blackberry jam, then the blackberries were back. And that's how you did it. Now you dedicate your life to this, of course. A canning session. We've gotten pretty good about how to can. We've gotten very efficient about it. And we have lots of mason jars. We have big cardboard crates of mason jars. And we buy the lids in the 100 count, the little disposable rubber sealing lids. We buy those by the 100 count. You can reuse them, and we do, but we still have lots and lots of new ones. So you buy the rings, you buy the lids. I recommend buying the rings in stainless steel because they last longer, and the lids, because you're probably going to throw them away anyway. It doesn't matter. But we do canning, and we haven't even done anything close to what we should be doing. You can manage your food supply to some extent. Now, will you have access to wheat to make flour? Will you have access to oats for the same purpose, or to make rolled oats? Maybe, maybe not. I buy wheat berries, they're so-called, suitable for grinding into flour, which I do fairly frequently. I buy wheat berries by the 50-pound bag. And they're delivered, it's Amazon Prime or UPS or something. And it gets delivered. I put it in my Century buckets, which are just big food-grade pails with screw-top lids. So they're like a huge mason jar. I just pour it into my Century buckets and put the lid on, and that seals out the air and the bugs. And I have wheat berries and fresh flour anytime I want it. Oh, we also have field corn. We had popcorn too, because we like popcorn, which reminds me, it's been a while since we had popcorn. But then we had field corn, which is different. Field corn is suitable for grinding into corn flour or corn meal, depending on how you're going to use it. And we make the best cornmeal to make cornbread or corn muffins or tortillas or whatever else. And we have all this field corn in the millennial buckets. I just go out there and get a jar of it, come inside, grind it up, and I have cornmeal. So if you had corn, which you were growing for the corn kernels, then you could collect the corn kernels and you could put them in your long-term storage, and then later on you can mill them into flour. Do you have a mill? I do. You would definitely want to have a mill, but if you do, then you can make your own flour and you can make your own cornmeal. Do you have open land to grow corn? Do you have open land to grow wheat? If you do, then you can plant your wheat. You can hope the rain irrigates it for you. Generally, wheat farming is dry land farming. I'm going on and on about this because food is going to be critical. You will have to grow your own food. In this transition, now is the time to fix that. Now is the time to start your backyard garden. If you don't have a backyard, you might be screwed. You might be seriously screwed. If you don't have a backyard garden, you may have to start thinking about your situation. What else do you need? Because I'm selfish, want electricity. I want my own electricity. And I have solar panels, and I have storage batteries, and I have all the interconnecting bits and bobs to have complete self-sufficient electricity collection and storage for basically 11 months out of the year. There's some really stormy, cloudy days in the middle of winter when the ability to keep the battery array charged up is degraded. But it's not that bad. And right now, because I still have the grid, the utility grid, I can use them as a backup. That works fine. We get into it. We get into the backup, I want to say in a serious way, maybe 10 times a year. A serious way means maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. And maybe the sun is out enough to sort of reduce our reliance on the grid. But there's maybe 2 or 3 times when there's just so much clouds that we're running on the grid pretty much all the time. So in the winter, if the utility went down and we had a massive collapse of the infrastructure, then there might be some occasions when you don't have electricity, and what do you do? You can't do much. But it's already winter. You're not doing much. So what do you want? You want candles, for illumination. Maybe you need to heat your home. Do you have a wood stove? Where'd your wood come from? Do you have a forest nearby or oak trees nearby that you could use for wood? Do you cut them down? That might not be a good idea. But if you collect the deadfall, right, the branches that fall off, maybe that's okay. Do you grow trees specifically for the wood? I don't know. That's a thought. You might have a whole acre of oak trees that you've planted, and you're going to cut some of them down each year and burn them for wood. I don't know. It's a possibility. If you have a lot of abandoned homes and businesses around, they're mostly made out of wood. It's pine. It's dry. It's not the best, but you could still use it if you had to in a pinch. So you could do that for your wintertime, or you could just tough it out. And then the rest of the time you have your solar power and your batteries and your backup. Now, that is only a transition strategy because your solar panels are eventually going to age out. Your batteries are eventually going to lose their ability to take and hold a charge. Even if you're using lithium-ion batteries, which you must be using, forget the lead acid, that's not even going to last a few years. But if you have lithium-ion batteries, then you might get 10, 20 years out of those things. And even when they're starting to drop off, they're doing something. They're not nothing. And even when they drop off enough to be almost useless, you still have the sunlight. You can do things during the day. You can run your power tools. You can do your cooking. You can heat your home. You can do the other things you want to do with electricity. And then when the sun goes down, you don't have that. And eventually, of course, the solar panels give out and the wiring frays and the charge controller stops charging and the inverters stop inverting, and pretty soon you just have no power. But you've had 10, 20 years of transition. So again, massive societal change is a series of steps of letting go. And you're going to have to let go of some things really fast. And that could be really dangerous, like your food supply just may disappear. It could just vanish. And within a week, there could be nothing on the shelves. So do you have anything in storage? Do you have anything in jars? Have you canned anything? Is your garden started, at least theoretically? Because at some point you may be really out of luck. But if you have some food in storage and you have some food in preservation, then you have a strategy. You have a scenario where you can endure the shock of the end of civilization long enough to, let's face it, what we're doing. And you can look at this image and be reminded, we're creating a new society. We're reorganizing ourselves around new priorities, new to us, but not necessarily new in the greater picture. 300 years ago, 400 years ago for sure, people were still focused on having, growing their own food, knowing where their flour comes from, knowing where the cornmeal comes from. It doesn't come from the store. It comes from the mill. And where's the corn come from? There are cornfields just outside the mill. And the corn comes in bags, and it comes out as cornmeal. And the wheat comes in bags from the threshing floor, and it gets turned into flour. And you just know all this. And maybe you even participated in the harvest to make sure that there's corn in bags to be made into cornmeal. And maybe you've participated in the wheat harvest to make sure there's wheat berries that can be ground into flour. And so you know, but we don't know now. We would be in a transition, and that transition period must start now. About your food, your electricity transition, because there won't be any in the near future. I'm going to say near, meaning 10 to 20 years for most people. Other things that you're going to lose and you're going to miss. Water. Water right now is delivered to your house via modern indoor plumbing, which is an amazing gift from modernity. The modern world has what we call indoor plumbing, but it is centrally processed. Somewhere there's a water company with a water plant that makes water. It's a manufacturing process. They take the water that you wouldn't want to drink and they treat it with chemicals or filters and all the above, and then they put it in the pipes, which is, a delivery mechanism, has to be maintained. And there's pumps. The pumps run on electricity. It's this whole thing that delivers water to the tap in your house. And most people understand the water to be, where's your water come from? Well, I go to the sink and I turn the tap. And if I turn the other one, I get hot water. And most people can't tell you where that water comes from. A lot of people can't even tell you where the hot water comes from. So where's your hot water come from? Well, it comes from the left tap. Okay, that's not what I mean. Where does it become hot and water? Well, I don't know. Okay, you may have a water heater. Do you know where it is? No. Oh, wait, maybe I do. I think it's over here in a closet or something, but I never go there. I never check it. It just always works. That's the level that's the relationship that most people have with their water supply. Well, in the absence of modernity, during our period of massive societal change, is that going to continue? Is anyone going to care enough about your water supply to keep the water company working? Now, it's possible that the city or the county or the state will take over the privately held water companies, and those may become a state or local utility. And then there are people whose job it is to require that to provide that for the public. Otherwise, it's possible if nobody has money anymore and no one's been paying their utility bills and the water company is frustrated and the shareholders are bitching, complaining that there's been no income, they just shut it down. They may just walk away from the water provisioning for you because you don't have a job, you don't have money. We've had a complete societal collapse. The modernity has fled. They're not paying their employees anymore, and so they just shut down. And would they care about you and your cold water on this side and hot water on that side? Would they care? No, of course not. Of course not. They're just going to walk away. They're just going to walk away. And you don't even know that they can do that. Nobody knows that they can do that. I know they can do that. And I know that they will. When there's no money coming in because we've had a massive societal collapse and there's no income, there's no jobs, there's no nothing, there's no UBI, there's no Social Security, there's nothing, there's no money. And people are gardening in their backyard and they're turning on the tap and the hose and they're watering their food, and they're never thinking about where's that water coming from. What are you going to do about that? Are you going to go to your county or your city and you're going to tell them, hey, you need to run this thing for us? Are they going to do that? Are they going to take those people and tell them, listen, you need to run the water supply, because without the water supply, all these people suddenly don't have water. And this is, 1 million people suddenly don't have water. 2 million, 3 million people don't have water. So don't let that happen. What are they going to say? Hey, listen, man, I used to get paid to do this. And when I got money, I went to the store to buy food. Well, now I'm spending all my time trying to scrounge up food. My wife is working all the time in the garden. I help her all the time. And otherwise, I'm out scrounging around in the rubble trying to find canned goods. And, I won't admit it, but I also steal food from other people. So that's my life right now. And you want me to go work at the water treatment plant? Are you even kidding? So how's that going to happen? Is there going to be some way to keep that water treatment running, and there's a person who does that, and they get paid in the same way that the miller gets paid for grinding the flour? It's a utility, and people need that to happen. People need the wheat to be ground into flour. And how does the miller get paid? Is there money? What is he going to do with the money? Can he buy food? Is there any surplus food someplace that the miller can buy when he's not out in the fields? When he's in the mill making the flour that everybody needs? What about the guy making the water that everybody needs? And what about the repair crew that has to go out and dig up the busted pipe and fix the busted pipe? How are they getting paid? Who's going to feed them? Because they just spent all day fixing busted pipes, like they always did in the past. They still got the truck. Oh, their truck runs on gasoline. Where's the gasoline coming from? Well, we have a small supply of gasoline. We give some of it to the utility workers and it's a long list of utility workers. Yes, it's the water, but it might also be the sewer utility. And it might also be the electric utility. Who knows what all? Internet. Who knows what things we're going to try and keep working in the absence of modernity, that these people simply don't have the time and don't have the inclination. No one's paying them. There is no corporation. It's all been taken over by the public governance. Make sure it works. Make sure the water keeps flowing. Make sure that there's electricity on the grid. Make sure all these things happen. Make sure the sewer gets pumped out. Make sure it gets treated. We don't want it dumping into the bay. We want it properly treated. Well, and what about the materials to even do that? We are nowhere close to being able to make this societal change. We are nowhere near. We're not even having the conversation about how we're going to have any of these things for us. Massive societal change is coming, and that's the level of it. It's not buy an electric car. It's not install solar panels. It's not, vacation green or carbon offsets or plant a tree. It's none of those things. That's just nibbling at the edges. That's not even nibbling at the edges. That's just hokum. That's just cope. That's just pretending. That's just make-believe. That's just unicorns. That you're going to consume your way out of this dilemma. You're not going to consume your way out of anything. Massive societal change is not a subtle change in consumer habits. It's a complete repudiation of consumer life. Complete abandonment of consumer life. With the caveat that you're going to consume water. And I don't know how to get around that. Well, I kind of do. Used to be, villages and towns would form around a reliable source of water. A river. It might be where a river enters the sea, because you also want a reliable way to conduct commerce. So you would build a port, and there'd be a river flowing in, and then you'd have access to the sea. You could send fishermen out to come in with a catch. Even if it's just canoes, right? You'd have to have some kind of a facility to beach the canoes, send them out, protect them from the waves, storms. So you'd have some sort of port facility, even if it's very primitive, and some sort of boat, even if it's just a dugout canoe. And then you'd have a river. And so you'd have fresh water, you'd have protein from the sea, Maybe there'll be inland meadows where you could graze your animals, and that's how we did it. Well, because of technology, we don't have to do that anymore. Here where I live, the water, some portion of the water that we use here comes from 300 miles away. It's in a reservoir up in the mountains, and it comes down in pipes, and then because it's been in a reservoir and the fish poop in it, the birds poop in it, it has to be treated. So it goes through a water treatment plant, and some part of this water has this long journey because my house is not on a river. Now there is a river not too far from here, and it's really small in the summer, and it has a decent flow year round. It could dry up, and if we don't get rain and we get a lot of heat instead, it could dry up. So maybe that's not that reliable of a water supply. So then what are you doing? Where is your massive societal change going to take you? Now, if you've got 1 million people living in your town and they're still dependent on that water coming from 300 miles away, and that stops because changes, maybe you can't have 1 million people anymore. La-di-da. La-di-da. How does that work itself out? Massive societal change. We can either get in front of this or we can just let it happen pell-mell. We will probably do the latter. I don't see how people can ever get out in front of this. They don't understand their vulnerability. They don't realize that it could all slip under the waves and disappear in a moment. And if they do think about it, then they just have to shrug and say, well, I hope someone figures it out, because they don't have agency to figure it out themselves. And when I say, yeah, you're going to have to live underground, at least partially, in order to escape the heat and to escape even the cold, and then the fires and everything else, and to have a defensible perimeter. All the things are going to have to change. And then, do you have water? Maybe not. Maybe some part of this picture that I still have here on the screen, maybe some part of this picture is digging a well. And how deep does the well have to go? Has the aquifer been completely depleted? Does your well have to be 300 feet deep? Wow, that's a big technological challenge. That's not like digging a well in medieval times where you could dig down 20 feet and hit the aquifer, and then you pull up your water with a bucket. That was a lot of work all by itself, but at least you could do it. Or having a river where you can walk down to the river with your 2 buckets on a pole over your shoulder and come back with 2 buckets of water. That's a lot of work. It's inconvenient, but at least you could do it. And we don't have that narrative here. I think that these communities become completely and utterly abandoned because of water alone. I don't see how any of this works. Any of it. If you capture rainwater. Yeah, I've done some of that. Oh, man. Yeah. Just think about it. How many thousands of gallons of water you have to capture just for yourself, your maintenance, including your bathing and washing dishes and other hygiene issues, washing laundry, washing clothes. And then growing your own food takes water. It might take a lot. People can't even conceive of what they're talking about when they're saying, oh, well, we'll just capture rainwater. No, you won't. And where are you going to store it? Oh, we'll just put rain barrels under each of the downspouts. Really? That's going to be your solution? That ain't going to cut it. I know how long that water lasts. We've been doing that. Would we end the winter with, 12, 13, 14, 50-gallon drums full of water? And it's a lot of work to fill up those drums. We have to work at it all winter, moving water around to get that in those drums. And is anybody else going to do that? No. And how long did that water last? I don't know. Once we started pumping it out and putting it on the garden, maybe a month. Good luck with that. Oh, and we weren't drinking it, cooking with it, or bathing with it. Just went on the garden. And you wouldn't want to drink it or cook with it. I mean, how the hell are you going to do that? Came off the roof. Forget it. Massive societal change. Oh man, people are not ready for this. It is coming. It is going to happen. When all is said and done, people will have either abandoned the things that clearly are not working, like going to the supermarket, maybe getting your water from a tap, or they will have evolved and preserved deliberately, that meaning you did the engineering assessments, you did the work, you made sure it happened, you made sure it worked for you. Not on accident, it was a deliberate plan. And they were able to keep something. They were able to keep electricity. They were able to keep water at the tap. They did something. Maybe not certainly individually, although, I can have my own electricity for a few years, a few decades maybe. But in terms of water, probably not. Am I going to dig a 300-foot well? I don't think so. Is your community going to dig a 300-foot well? No, you could. I mean, in theory. Will your county and your city let you do that? No. They won't. So you have to wait until there is no county and there is no city. Fair enough. But now you're going to have a professional well driller come out and drill you a well. Will they? No. Because their people are going to be busy moving away, building different communities for themselves. There'll be a truck for drilling wells, and there'll be all this well casing and all the pumps and everything else laying around in warehouses and out in yards and things like that. But there will be nobody there to run the equipment, and there won't be any gas to run the truck, and there won't be any spare parts for the truck or the other consumables like the well casings. So there you go. It won't happen. I mean, in theory it could. Will it? No, it won't. Massive societal change, honestly, needs to happen right now. The county and the city needs to get the fuck out of the way. They just need to get out of the way. And while we still have well drilling equipment and those men still get paid and they're willing to come to your house and drill you a well, we need to get that equipment out into the neighborhoods and sink those wells and hook those wells up and create completely local sources of water. And then put in the filtration systems or teach people how to manage water from a well and how to protect the well from, contamination from the surroundings, contamination from fertilizers, untreated sewage, the whole thing. That has to be done now. Because if we wait until, the collapse of modernity, then there simply won't be anybody to do the work. And then our chances of survival drop to zero. Zero. Massive societal change. This is a very delicate moment right now. We can say, we need massive societal change. We need more EVs. We need more renewable energy. I wish it was as easy as that. Massive societal change means that all the barriers to doing all the things that are in this picture need to move aside. The permitting process and the regulatory process and the fear of communism and the fear of change and capitalism and all this stuff that's going to stop you from trying to create an environment where you can fucking survive. All the barriers must be shunted aside right now. Now, while we still have modernity, we must kick to the curb everything that's going to prevent us from making massive societal change. And then we have to make the massive societal change happen. For groups of people, for individuals where that makes sense, like solar panels and storage, we need to make local manufacturing for certain things. We need to reinvent blacksmithing. We need to reinvent agronomy and master gardening programs. We have to reinvent water treatment and access to water. If it's just a bucket on a rope, then that's what we have to do, all right? Well, we have to do these things. We have to make these things happen. The massive societal change, which is massive. The word here is massive. The next word is societal. And the third word is change. All three of those are anathema and apostate in a corporate and capitalistic environment. Heresy. Massive societal change is heresy. Because that's what capitalism is. It's a kind of religion. It's abstractions, it's got its gods, it has its rituals, it has its promised outcomes in some future life, and most of it's bullshit, and you're going to find out how bullshit it is when it collapses. Just like any other lost religion. I guess it was bullshit because it's lost now. We don't know who the Mesopotamians worshipped. We barely know who the Romans worshipped. And it didn't really help them. It was bullshit. Zeus didn't come to save anybody. They're gone. They're fucking gone. And their religion went with them. It was bullshit. And capitalism and consumerism, this is a bullshit religion. Because it's based on abstractions. Yeah, okay, the gods have changed. The god of capitalism is basically Hermes. But, Hermes is bullshit. And it's not going forward. All it can do is hold us back. During a time of massive societal change, it can hold us back. And if it holds us back successfully, then we die. Couldn't turn the corner. Couldn't make the change. Didn't have time to use the last years, the last part of a decade of modernity to make the massive societal change we needed to make. And then we died. What can I say? We're dependent on these things. There's 1,000 things we have to change. I've mentioned food and water, sewer treatment, electricity. There's 1,000 things we have to change. And each of those things, each of those areas of change has 1,000 subtasks. I mentioned water. There's 1,000 things you'd have to do to have your own water supply for your neighborhood. 1,000 things right now. And of course, the biggest one is just getting the county and the local leadership to let you do it. There's probably 400 things, just getting permission. 400 things you'd have to do. 400 steps. Many of which are emails and attorneys and arguments and getting permits and getting amendments to permitting processes and of course ultimately maybe getting rid of some people. Getting rid of the people who just won't let you do it because it's communism or it's something else. That we have massive societal change also means generational change. We don't have time. And when the chips are down and we're desperate, it may be too late. And those people will eventually get out of the way, but it's too late. How do we do this? It's not a slam dunk. Yeah, maybe that small groups of people can do this. Small groups of people move themselves down to the river and they build their hobbit houses and they clear the land and they have some crops and they share a garden and they haul their water up from the river and they hope the river doesn't go dry. But global heating, climate change, maybe it does. And do they have maybe then they have to abandon that region. They have to go find some place that has more reliable supply of water. Maybe we have to go north, right? Climate change drives them north, and what they're looking for is a river or a stream. Oh, and then when they get there, they find there's people there who already like their water and their river and their stream, and they don't want people to come in there and invade their turf and build new houses and start taking the water for their crops and their families. This is a shit show, people. This is an absolute shit show. If we don't figure this shit out and adopt and accept, embrace massive societal change, and we don't do it immediately with absolute support from our so-called leadership, if we can't pull this this chestnuts out of the fire, then we are well and truly fucked. And I'm not sure we can do it. I don't think we can do it. I think it's generational change, and that generational change is going to come when the last of the blockheads are out of the way. And that means that modernity has already collapsed and it's done. And then your massive societal change is imposed on you. And there will be people who got out ahead of it, left town, left the area, left the community, went someplace where they knew they had a supply of water, and they had enough land that maybe they could have some crops, and they settled down and they had a community around them and they all agreed to do the same thing. And then after modernity fell apart, then they had to defend what they set up from all of the refugees and marauders, which are going to number in the billions. This is grim. This is really sketchy. We need massive societal change. They're not going to let us do it. The capitalism won't let us do it. Absolutely won't let you do it. Until it doesn't exist anymore. And when it doesn't exist anymore, are you going to run the truck that drills the well? I mean, I could probably do that, but I'd have to figure it out as I go along. You and I would have to figure it out. We'd have to go find the truck, bring the truck, learn how the truck works, read a bunch of books. Maybe they're even found at the place where the truck used to be, and we read a bunch of books on how to drill a well, and then you and I drill the well, and we drill it with the last of the gasoline, because it runs on gasoline, you know that, or diesel, whichever, it doesn't matter. And we drill our well with the last of the fossil fuels and the last truck and the last drill bit and the last of the well casings, and we do that, we manage that, we get all that done, and then we have to filter the water, we have to pump the water, we need electricity for both. And it's just 1,000 things. And you're scrambling around trying to feed yourself while you're trying to come up with a water supply. Because, yeah. How are we going to do this? No one's having this conversation, for fuck's sake. Can we have this conversation or not? There's 1,000 things we need to change right now on a massive level. 1,000 things, including getting the blockheads out of the way. We need to be having this discussion. We need to force them to move. They either need to move to help us or they need to move the fuck out of the way. Will they do that? Will they allow their power to be taken from them? Will they allow massive societal change if it costs them their power over us? I don't know. Do you think they will? Have they ever? Do you think capitalism is going to get out of the fucking way so that we can start to become more resilient? Do you think the water company is going to let you take water out of the ground that theoretically belongs to them? It's under your own property. It's under your neighborhood. They sell that water. That's not your water. Do you think they're going to let you do that? If you go to the city council and you have this really great idea that more neighborhoods should have their own pumps on their property in their neighborhood for on a shared basis, so that in the event of the collapse of modernity, they can at least have some story about a water supply. Even if they have to go with a bucket to, get the water out of the spigot where the well is and carry it to their house, at least they'd have a story. Do you think the fucking water company, the goddamn motherfuckers at the water company, you think that bunch of trash is going to let you pull off that? Oh, I got some news for you, pal. The answer is no. The answer is fuck no. They're not going to let you pump the water out from under your own property to stay alive. The answer is fuck no. And when they're gone, and they can't tell you fuck no anymore, they can't threaten to sue you into oblivion, sue you into bankruptcy, when they can't destroy your life just for you wanting to have your own water supply, your own secured water supply, when they can't do that anymore because they're all dead or they've all run away to go live in Utah or something stupid. And finally, the blockheads are out of your way. Finally, the morons, the stupid capitalist fuckwats are out of your way. And you could finally save yourself. Can you? Will anyone help you? Will they drive the truck? Will they sink the well? Will they case the well? Will they install the pump? Will you have the electricity to run the pump? Will you have a filtration system so you don't die from drinking the water you just owned? No, and no. You won't. Massive societal change is not going to happen. But it has to happen. Or you and I are going to die. They won't allow massive societal change. They're going to get in your way. They're going to sue you. They're going to throw you in fucking jail for even asking. And yet it has to happen. They don't care if you live or die. They care about their money and their power and their control, and they want to keep all of those things working for them. They want you addicted to what they are selling forever. And then, of course, they're just going to abandon you completely. They're just going to run away. They're going to take their knowledge and their ability to run the pumps and to run the water and to repair the water system, and everything. And the 18-wheelers aren't going to show up at the grocery store, and the sewage won't be pumped and treated, and the electricity will be shut off. And these wankers, these motherfuckers, these power-hungry, desperate, egotistical motherfuckers, they're just going to leave town. And they'll shut everything off, and they'll put a big padlock on the door, so you can't even get in there to get it running again. They won't let you do it. They'll probably uproot the equipment and sell it to the Chinese before they leave town. Because they can't stand the thought of massive societal change. They can't stand the thought. And yet it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, you and I are going to die. That's the problem. That's the challenge. That's the wicked problem. That's the wicked problem. Problem you can't get out of. Where there's no solution. There's no way out. We're backed into an alley. We've been sent down a blind alley, and now it's been closed off behind us. As soon as modernity starts to stumble, the rocks are going to fall in around us, and there's going to be no way out. That's it. We're stuck. We're trapped. We're trapped in modernity. And when modernity abandons us and modernity sells off all the equipment to the Chinese and goes to live in Oregon and, take its money and run, and the corporation closes up shop and the workers, scatter to the wind, and all the knowledge is gone, and the warehouse is locked up, plus there's no equipment in there anyway because it all got sold to the Chinese. When all that happens, you and I are screwed. We're not getting the massive societal change we need because we can't, because they won't let it happen. And yet we have to have it happen. That's it. How are we going to square that circle? I don't know. I really don't know. This is scary. This is some scary end time shit here going on. And it doesn't even involve 7 angels opening 7 seals. Okay, we're not talking about the book of Revelation. We're talking about the end of modernity. And you're surrounded by it. So am I. And we're dependent on it. Both of us. And there's no way out. And they won't let us solve this problem. Hell, they probably wouldn't even let us have front yard gardens, truth be known. Truth be known. Yeah, you have a front yard garden? Yeah, you get a permit strike or some bullshit. Like, you get your front door red tagged. Clean this shit up. This is attracting vermin. This looks ugly. We don't want to look like an agricultural community. That's a bunch of losers. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to have your slaves out here picking cotton. Just trying to survive here, okay? Do you mind? Oh, yeah, we mind a lot. What am I supposed to say to that? We need massive societal change. We're going to get it one way or the other. And when this whole shit show comes crashing down, I guess you and I are going to be on the road. And the few people that get lucky and find a river system and a valley, and it doesn't flood too often, and it's never too hot, and the crops grow okay, and they figure out how to make wooden wagons and wooden wheels, and maybe they have someone who can work metal, and they kind of figure it all out. Maybe that's I don't think it's 8 million people. I don't think it's 8 million people. I don't think it's 1/10 of 1% of the current population. I think maybe 100,000 people get lucky and figure this out. Either they just were lucky to start with, or they get lucky and they end up someplace that no one knows about, or that no one finds them, or they just are isolated enough, and there's enough water, enough land, and enough cooperation. You have enough people. You do need a lot of people. You don't form a village with 2 families. You form a village with 40 families, okay? That's your labor for harvesting and planting and setting up the food and for security. You need 40 families. You might need 100 families. Okay, did you figure all that out? Who figures all that out? Who on accident, since we're not going to be allowed to do it in advance, who on accident figures all that out and gets lucky? 100,000 people? I don't know. I can't even imagine how many people get that lucky, basically win the cosmic lottery, and end up being what remains of the human world. I don't know. This is not obvious to me. Without massive societal change, the opportunities for survival drop to practically zero. Zero. And 100,000 people survive after the end of modernity is so close to an extinction event that it just rattles me. We are so stupid and greedy and selfish that we won't even get on the existing lifeboats or even think about lifeboats before this Titanic sinks beneath the waves. And the capitalists and the current leadership are going to keep us on the boat even as it sinks. They're stupid. They're greedy. They're retarded. They're fucking ideologues. They're all about capitalism. Everybody's on the take. Everybody's on the make. They've all got their fingers in the pie. They're all slurping from the bucket. And there's no way they're going to let us, they're not going to give us or let us reach for the massive societal change that's necessary to survive this coming shit show. And the show has already started. It's already started. And they're going to stay in the way until the last dog is hung. What are we going to do? What are you and I going to do? Man, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't see how. I don't see how anybody survives this. I really don't. I don't see how they let us do it. They're so blinded and so egocentric and so addicted to capitalism and control and power and saying no to everything. I don't see how we survive this. I don't think we do. We thrive on accident. Some people will survive. I have my knowledge, I have my skills, I have my abilities. If it goes tits up, then I can just blow my way out of here. I can fight my way out of here, and I can probably get ahead of it. Most likely, I'm not getting on a freeway full of broken down cars. I can get out of here, and I can find a community, and I can find exactly the situation that's going to make this work, and I can tell those people, okay, I'm a wizard. I am the straight up real deal. And you let me into your community and you feed me, and I just need to live in a 10 by 10 tiny house, okay? And I'll build it myself, and I'll show you how to build them. And you let me live on your property, and you let me live in a 10 by 10 tiny house, and we're going to figure this shit out because it's gone down. I can do that. I have a lot to offer. I've got the skills. I've got the determination. I've got the savagery. I could probably figure it out. There's 100,000 people in the entire goddamned world who are thinking these thoughts right now. 100,000 people in the entirety of the human race that are thinking these thoughts right now. Massive societal change with the knowledge that we're not going to be allowed to do this until it's over. You're going to have your massive societal change at the tip of a spear. Will you survive it? I don't know. There's 100,000 people likely to survive this near extinction event. I can't even imagine. Maybe 1 million. I can't even imagine how many. There are so few people who can pull this off. Start thinking about it. You all need to think about where you're going to be when the hammer drops. We all need to be working with our so-called leaders to wake those turd blossoms the fuck up. You need to wake up. You tell them they need to wake up. It's over. And we need to start making our communities resilient. And that means a food supply, a water supply, a local leadership, materials. They need to be set up with seed corn or any kind of seeds for any kind of crops. They need to have open land. That means a bulldozer working, getting those streets torn up. And do we have the leadership for that? Fuck no. We need that leadership. We need to wake them up. They need to wake up. They need to see the light. They need to understand that it's over. And global heating and climate change and everything else that's coming, and the refugees and the ideologues and the civil wars and everything that's coming for us. It's going to ruin everything. And we're going to get some massive societal change whether we like it or not. And the best way to manage that is to get out in front of it. Will they let us? I guess we're going to find out, aren't we? I don't know if there can be a part 3 to this. I'm angry and depressed right now. Well, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to think? I know what we're up against. It makes me angry. It makes me depressed. What a way to go. What a way to end the story. I hope somebody survives it. I really do. I don't care who they are. I don't care what the color of their skin is. I hope they find their people. I hope they circle their wagons. I hope they have the water and the food and the tranquility and the peace they need to focus. And I hope they raise their children, and I hope they teach them. This is how we survived. And we want you to know that. We want you to remember what it was like before. And don't do that. And don't be like that. Somebody was going to survive, and they'll raise their children, and they'll teach them different. Okay, I guess I can live with that. Even if I can't survive the downturn and the collapse of civilization, the collapse of modernity, I will at least take that with me. That, yeah, I guess somebody will figure it out. 10,000, 100,000, maybe a million. Some group of people will figure it out. Okay? I'd like to be there. I'd like to help them. We'll see. I'm not real confident right now, obviously. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel differently about it, but right now I don't feel very good about it at all. Don't die.